You ever look at everything going on in the world and just think, this has to be about more than just politics? Well, one writer argues you're absolutely right. She thinks the problem goes much, much deeper than we imagine. So let's get into it. Let's dive into this really provocative theory about what's truly broken in our modern world.
I mean, it's a feeling a lot of us share, right? This sense of just constant crisis, dysfunction, and polarization that seems like no simple political fix is ever going to work. It's like someone tossed the entire rulebook out the window, and no one has any idea how to put things back together again.
So, the author of the piece we're looking at, Anna K. Winters, she actually has a name for this. She says we're not just in a political crisis. Nope, we're in a meta-crisis. And what that means is a total breakdown of the very foundations of our society.
Okay, so before we can even get to any potential solutions, we first have to really understand her diagnosis of the problem. And it's a diagnosis that goes way beyond politics and strikes right at the core of our modern identity.
The author calls this the meta-crisis of liberalism. And, the best way to think about it is like society's operating system just crashing. All that foundational code, ideas like individual freedom, constant progress, the power of reason, it's just not producing stable results anymore. Instead, all it's creating is more division and chaos. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. The author takes this a whole step further. She argues the political chaos we all see is just a symptom of a much deeper, almost spiritual problem. She borrows a term from the philosopher Ferdinand Ulrich and calls it a crisis of being. So it's not a problem with our politics, but with our fundamental understanding of reality itself. And this is what she calls the meta-political sphere. So how do we even begin to think about this meta-political space? I mean, it's a pretty abstract idea. Well, to explain it, the author introduces this really powerful and kind of poetic metaphor.
She calls this meta-political space the City of the Moon, or Civitas Lunae. Now, the key is that the moon isn't the source of light itself, right? It just reflects a higher light down onto the world of our everyday politics.
And this slide just illustrates her framework brilliantly. So up top, you've got the sun. That represents divine truth or ultimate reality. Then in the middle, there's the moon. That's the metapolitical space, the realm of culture, philosophy, and theology that interprets and reflects that truth. And then at the bottom, there's us, on Earth, the world of policy debates and elections, which gets all its light from the moon. Her whole argument is that our moon is broken, which means the light reaching Earth is distorted.
All right, so with this sun-moon-earth model in mind, let's see how the author actually applies it. She uses it as a tool to critique modern political ideologies, arguing that many of them are making the same fundamental mistake.
She looks at two political projects that seem like they're polar opposites. On one hand, you've got radical Marxism, which we all know. On the other, there's this less-known far-right movement called neo-reaction. So Marxists want to tear down the system for a classless society. Neo-reactionaries, they want to replace democracy with a CEO-like monarch to create an efficient, corporate-style state. I mean, totally different, right? Well, she argues they are just two sides of the same flawed coin.
The way she connects them is through this really powerful concept from the philosopher Jean-Luc Marion, the idol. See, Marion argues that politics, just by its very nature, always has a tendency to create these idols.
So this is a crucial point. An idol here isn't a statue. It's any concept of the ultimate good that we build ourselves in our own image so that we can manage it and control it. Instead of opening us up to something transcendent and bigger than us, an idol just reflects our own desires and limitations right back at us. It basically traps us in a closed loop.
And here's how she applies that idea. Marxism, she argues, makes an idol out of history or the revolution. It takes purely human material goals and treats them as the ultimate, divine reality, completely closing the door to anything beyond that. And neo-reaction, it does the exact same thing, just with power. It basically worships a man-made vision of absolute sovereignty. So in both cases, humanity ends up worshiping a reflection of its own ambitions and gets trapped in that same closed loop.
So if these huge modern political projects are all just different forms of idolatry, what's the alternative? Well, this brings us to the author's own proposal, which she calls radical reaction.
Now, the author argues that to even understand the solution, we have to trace the problem all the way back to its historical root, to a hidden theological choice that was made a long time ago, one that set the stage for our entire modern crisis.
She traces it to a conflict between two ancient theories of power.
The first, which she calls Augustinian, says that power is legitimate when a ruler resembles the virtues of the people under a higher moral law. Think of it as leadership based on character. The second view, which she calls Pelagian, argues power is just a contract. A ruler is legitimate simply because we authorize them through consent. It's all about procedure, not character. And she says our modern world, we definitely chose that second path.
And here is her core claim. Our entire political system is built on that second model of pure authorization. And she traces this whole idea that humanity can perfect itself through its own will, without any need for divine grace, back to an ancient Christian heresy called Pelagianism. At its core, it's the belief that we can save ourselves.
And this brings us right to her definition of radical reaction. Now, this is not a political party, it's a theological position. She describes it as a spiritual war against that self-reliant Pelagian logic that sits at the very root of our politics. The battle, in her view, isn't for Congress, it's for the soul of our civilization. So the goals here are profound. It aims to completely change the underlying metaphysical assumptions that shape our world. The idea is to expose the idols we worship, whether that's individual liberty or revolutionary democracy, and clear the ground for a return to what the author sees as Christian truth. And where does this battle take place? You guessed it, in the City of the Moon, that metapolitical space of ideas, culture, and faith.
And that leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. The author's entire argument challenges us to look beyond the daily headlines. It asks us, what if the real fight for the future isn't about tax policy or healthcare, but about the invisible foundational beliefs that shape our reality? What if the real battlefield is the City of the Moon,